Hi, and welcome to another episode from Semi Sages of the Pages. I'm Morgan.
This is Molly.
And, and I'm Teresa. We've been doing this long enough. It goes Morgan, Molly, Teresa. Morgan, Molly, Teresa.
You would think Eminem. But we are so excited today because, as you can see by our backgrounds, at least you can see by Molly and Morgan's background, that we're going to get into genres. Yes, shame and Teresa. No, actually, she's got it. She's got it. We're going to get into understanding the psychology of why you love the genre you love, whether it's reading that genre to escape or writing that genre to escape. We want to help you unravel or unwrap, because if you're in the mood for Christmas cozies, maybe. Teresa's a great writer, by the way. Pitch for her book. What's your book called again, Teresa?
Wrapping Paper Rivals.
Oh yeah, so we should unwrap wrapping paper rivals for a great Christmas gift for anyone you know that loves cozy romances. But we're gonna get right to it because we want you as the listeners, and I want to take the test because I haven't done it yet, to enjoy a test with us to find out first what genre is your favorite, and then second, we're going to do a deep dive into the psychological call of that genre. So if you already know your favorite genre, put it in the chat. And if you want to guess what favorite genre Molly or Teresa or I have, please put that in the chat. We'll give you a shout out.
I was going to say, I bet you can't guess, but I bet you can, actually.
I bet you can. Actually, I don't know if I have one. I read it. Well, sorry.
See, now we're going to find out. All right, this is for Teresa.
Wait.
All of you listening who think you don't have a favorite genre, we're going to put you to the test right now. Molly, sorry, let me cut you off.
Before we jump right into this quiz, I did want to say, Morgan, are we going to talk about the difference between genres and age categories?
I did not have that planned.
That's
Go
okay,
for it, Molly.
That's okay.
Take it.
No. I think it's okay that we don't have that planned, but maybe we can acknowledge it that we're talking about genres. Genres can exist in adult fiction or nonfiction. And then there's also those can exist in young adult, chapter books, picture books as well, right? So we're going to talk about genre regardless, even though we know that genre conventions for young adult might be different than some genre conventions for adults, even if it's the same genre. So we understand that.
Don't panic. We're not going to get into conventions. We're just going to have fun
talking
about escaping and what stories do you like to escape into. So with that, let's start our quiz. Are you ready? Let's find out what your favorite genre to escape is. I'll take the first one. Okay. If you could live in a book world, so your book is your world, your Weltanschauung, wherever you're headed, which one would it be? Get ready. Would it be A, a gritty novel setting with dark alleys and clues everywhere? Would it be B, a magical kingdom with enchanted forests? Would it be C, a historical time period that feels real and grounded? Would it be D, a cozy small town with charming characters? Would it be E, a high-tech future city with cool gadgets? F, an introspective world where I can dive into the characters' psyches? Or G, the real world with endless possibilities to learn more about who I am?
I love how Molly acted them out.
That was great. Taking it to a new level for me, girl. Way to knock it out.
Improv training.
All right. So you can read number 2. Hopefully everybody's got the one that they are. I'm tied between 2 on that one. So, all right.
All right. Make sure, if you're in the chat, make sure to comment which one you'd prefer. Do we want to say what our answers are before we go to question 2?
No.
Sure. No. Oh, no. Okay.
No. Okay. Do I have question 2? Or Teresa, do you have question 2?
I have it up, so I can do question 2.
You do question 2.
I shall. I think it's question 2. Which quote resonates with you the most? A, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. B, not all of those who wander are lost. C, real people do real things. D, love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. E, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Or F, I am no bird and no net ensnares me. Oh, excuse me, there's one more. Or G, knowledge is power.
That one was harder to act out, I will admit. I just mostly looked back and forth.
Man.
I'm going to put those in the chat so people can see them.
Yeah. That's a hard one. Can they all resonate? Is that a thing that we can do?
That's how I felt. I was like, I'm sorry, where is the all of the above?
Mm-hmm.
And how I live my life, I'm finding out, is different than what I want in my books.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're going off of this quiz.
There was one thing you read that I was like, that's my life. That's how I live my life. But then I was like, but I want that in my books. Because then I guess I'm not escaping my real life if it's in my books, right?
Exactly. Okay, and I know I've got question 3. I know I'm about to get it. I know. But the first question, right? Like a gritty novel set with dark alleyways and clues everywhere. I don't want to live. That sounds stressful. Like it sounds great to read about, but that I don't want to live that. I want to live in the cozy town. It might be boring to read. Like I'm not a big reader of cozies, but I like the idea of my life being cozy. Anyway.
Well, I like Talia's on your page, right? She's saying like cozy town for sure, right? And I love it. She's like, I'm no bird. I know who I am. Thank you.
Nice.
I love it.
All right. We're going to focus up our last question. What is your ideal way to unwind? A, exploring mysterious places and trying to solve puzzles. B, escaping into a magical world of fantasy creatures. So you play D&D. C, diving into stories about real people's lives and struggles. You watch the news. D, curling up with a heartwarming story about love and friendship. E, discovering futuristic world with advanced technology. F, reflecting on humanity's deepest questions. And finally, G, learning about something new in science or history or the humanities.
I like it.
Morgan, are you putting these ones in the chat too?
Yeah, I'm trying. Hold on.
You're the best.
Just having like a little tech difficulties with my brain.
I think this one is an interesting one. This in question one is interesting because I think it's very clear, depending on what you click on or what you select, what genre that correlates to, you know?
Okay.
Which is okay. That's okay.
If that's true. As soon as I get this in the chat.
As soon as technology cooperates with
I'm
us.
so sorry about my voice because obviously I have a cold.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, so Molly, if you're so confident, what is?
Oh, am I?
First of all, what's your number one answer?
What's my number one what?
Answer. Were you an A girl, a B girl, a C girl, a D girl? G. Sorry,
I'm mostly a B girl.
You're a B
that does
girl.
That does not make me a break dancer. I would go into the Olympics and I would be like Ray Gun. Okay, that would be me. But yeah, B.
And without cheating, don't look because I know where I have the answers. What genre?
I'm not looking.
What genre do you think you are? That means you are then.
I think that means fantasy.
And are you a fantasy girl?
I can look now.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I disappeared. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Well, it's fantasy.
Yeah, I read other things too, but primarily I read fantasy. Yeah.
So that works perfect. All right, Teresa, how about you? Was it true for you?
No.
Okay, what did you get?
Honestly, I'm a bee girl too. I mean, if you're talking about a magical kingdom with enchanted forest, yes, please.
Sounds great.
Not all those who wander are lost. That actually is like one of my life quotes. I remind myself of that because I tend to take on a lot and, wander and explore life. And it doesn't mean I'm lost. It means I'm exploring. And I would really like to escape into a magical world full of fantastical creatures. Thank you very much. But I don't read a lot of pure medieval based fantasy. I read a lot of urban fantasy.
Oh, see, that's an interesting genre because I don't read a lot of medieval based fantasy either. I read a lot of fantasy, but not necessarily like swords and knights and
Right.
George R.R. Martin type fantasy right now.
Yeah.
I have, but it's not what I go to right now.
I also read a lot of thrillers and mysteries too. That's actually my go-to when I'm stuck in traffic because it keeps me like entertained.
You mean you listen? You don't read in traffic. We're just wanting to clarify this. Teresa's a responsible driver.
Well, kind of. All right, Morgan, you're up. What
Well,
about
wait,
you?
I'm confused. You said no, but then you quoted all the things for fantasy and said you did read fantasy.
I read urban fantasy, not sword and sorcery fantasy.
But this doesn't say sword and sorcery. This just says
Very
fantasy.
True. That's true.
Where
But
did you get that bias from?
But a magical kingdom with enchanted forests, that speaks of sword and
Urban
sorcery.
fantasy.
Urban fantasy.
Urban fantasy is in city, hence the word urban.
Yeah, and you have mystery like forests in there, like the fae folk in an urban setting, like as a thing, is a whole theme. Like it's a big trope.
Totally fits that, don't you think?
Yeah.
We think you're making things up.
Damn, girl, that's mean.
Anyway, you let us know in the comments. We don't have to fight. You can let us know in the comments what you think. And
well, I don't think there's a distinction. I don't think the questions are necessarily creating a distinction.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Morgan, you're up.
Yeah, Talia's like, we got to mix the genres. Okay.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I like what Mark asked. He's like, what if you have like lots of different, no, I think Mark was G all the way, which is science fiction. No, which one's G? Learning something new in science. Oh, that's a nonfiction. So reading to learn and self-help and like how-to books. Those are great. And those sell more than any other genre. So that's amazing. So if you picked A, you liked mystery and thriller. If you picked B, like the other girls, you were fantasy. C was biography and memoir. D was every great author like that's in romance. Like that's where they say that the bulk of the readers go is romance. So if you like to read romance and write romance, especially if you like to write it, that's great because there's a lot of readers there that are ferocious and they read a lot. And then there's me. I'm E, as my thing gives it away. I'm science fiction. But I also really, really love F, literary fiction. So who cares about that? Let's get into what it tells us about our psychology, right? So I think that, Teresa, you are a true lover of mystery and thriller, right?
I am. So thriller and mystery readers, the reason that people tend to read thrillers and mysteries, and it's the reason that I listen, don't read, them in the car. It's action-packed. It makes you turn the page. It's very suspenseful and everything else. You're like, I really want to know, was it the stripper or the boyfriend? I don't know. True story. I got so hooked on that book wanting to know which one it was.
What was it?
It was the ex-boyfriend. It wasn't the stripper.
It was the ex-boyfriend.
Yeah. But I lost my train of thought there. Oh, it's the why. And a lot of times with mysteries and thrillers, you, the reader, are following along. You're discovering the same information the main character is a lot of the time. So you're analyzing it there too and being like, well, actually, that shoe print might mean blah, 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 or that type of thing. So it's intellectually kind of stimulating and it helps you solve problems. It can also be a way to escape and to explore kind of some darker themes in life too. I always say a lot of times you put yourself in those situations. What would I do if I walked into my house and somebody attacked me? You kind of do mental role playing and solve those problems. So, yeah.
I think for me, one of the reasons I am not often attracted to this genre, right? You talk about why you might be, why you might not be, is because I really love characters.
I would agree with that.
Mystery thrillers tend to be, not always, but tend to be very, like you mentioned, Teresa, very plot focused, very like solve the mystery, like think about this, analyze, like that kind of thing, go through the thought process. And I like that doesn't, for my brain, the way my brain works, that's not like fun for me. That's not what I enjoy reading for fun.
I would agree with that. A lot of times I feel like the characters are very flat. They're very two-dimensional. Not very, but they are somewhat two-dimensional.
I love them. Even like, I'm going to out myself as a Jack Reacher reader because I am. And I love them because I love trying to pick out which clues are going to build on themselves. And while the characters might be a different kind of character development, I would argue that their ability to use their intuition and certain aspects of their growth or their arcs are unique in sci-fi, or not sci-fi, sorry, I'm Freudian slip, in mysteries and suspense and thrillers that I think can be unique and different that can fall flat in other genres. So where the intellectual aspects of their character, like Sherlock, or House, the intellectual aspects of their character come out. And I think that form of characterization is really what I love because it's like puzzles and play. And I think that's really fun.
I think people who maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Let me flesh out an idea here.
We know all the answers to psychology.
Yeah. I think to me, a lot of times a mystery thriller is in many ways like a serialized TV show. So you get the same character typically you can get the same character every single book, right? If you're reading in a series, you know who that character is, and there's comfort in there. There's comfort in like, who they are, they're going to go solve a mystery. So here's my example is like Clive Cussler, right? You're going to have a maritime history mystery. You're going to learn something. You're going to have action. Clive's going to like have a rendezvous with not Clive, that's the author, but the main character is going to have like a rendezvous with a pretty love interest, and eventually will save the day. So there's comfort in knowing where you're going to end up, even if you don't know how you're going to get there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, ready to move on to another genre?
Heck yeah.
Fantasy.
Fantasy. Okay, so the thing about fantasy, I think, and Teresa touched on this, is that fantasy is an incredibly broad genre that can encompass so many different things and have so many different subgenres. And we already talked about someone who might love contemporary fantasy or urban fantasy might hate medieval sword and sorcery fantasy. They might not like historical fantasy. There's place for all. But what that means is like, I think people come to fantasy for different, and then there are subgenres, right? There's now romantasy. So people can come to the genre with a lot of different wants and desires and, needs, and they might not like everything in there. So I'm going to do my best to kind of like why it draws people in overall. And I think one of the biggest reasons is it's fun and it's interesting, and sometimes there's a power fantasy element, right? Like, what would I do if I had magical powers and I could wave a wand and I could, escape from underneath the cupboard under the stairs? Or what if I could ride a dragon? Or that kind of thing. And there are usually high stakes in fantasy as well. I think there's an element of like the people in fantasy not always tend to be able to affect the world around them in good and bad ways. And I think sometimes in the world we live, you can feel powerless. You can feel like it doesn't matter how much I can't make the world change. And oftentimes in fantasy, those characters have a say, they have a voice, they have something to do, and it matters what they do. Not always.
So much of Leigh Bardugo's characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm like, oh, and then when you were talking about romanticy, that to me, I was like, oh my gosh, Sarah J. Maas, like I never thought of her like that. But as you were describing it, I was like, oh wow, like it was like I know you probably all already thought that, but it was like a low aha moment.
She was the one that really got that genre going.
Yeah.
So, if someone doesn't know what romanticy is, that's a newer term for something that has existed for a long time, which is, I would say, people argue, is it romance book or is it a fantasy book? It is both. It is a fantasy book that primarily features a romance as
The
a plot. Yeah.
Or is Anne McCaffrey that?
No. I would say not. And I've read all of Anne McCaffrey's books, not for a long time. I would say the romance is very much a sub, and not a huge part of it either. Even that survival book that she wrote. I wish Chris Banner was here. She would know. The book about the aliens that took humans and then popped
the Ice Barbarians. No, different one. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. Even the romance in that one is very much a subplot. Anyways.
More like Interview with a Vampire kind of stuff.
Yeah. Interview. I could see Interview. Well, okay, but Interview is a romance, but it is a romance when male romance was not as mainstream as it is now. So Interview, if you read it with that lens, yes, it is a romance.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I just got to get that clear.
No worries. I think romanticy is one of those things that people like. It is kind of a like, is it a romance in a fantasy world? Is it a fantasy with a lot of romance in there? Yes, and you can debate it, but yeah, I think fantasy overall as a genre has a lot of that kind of power aspect of it, and then also fantasy not all. And I think this is a distinction between many types of fantasy and sword and sorcery fantasy, high fantasy, some might call it, is that much fantasy tends to be very focused on characters and like tight on character developmental arcs, which a lot of people like. The high fantasy can get more
George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, which are great things.
Great books.
Right, but you're not in somebody's head. You're not like intimately following them, which is great and fine, but it is a big distinction. So you see a lot of people maybe don't like those because they're not as invested in the character, I think, is where you kind of get that description. And you want to have a big adventure. Great, awesome, big adventure, road trip, go do it. And fantasy has something for everybody.
It does. And I think Talia was really, she had that comment about, I think we're supposed to mix genres. And I really feel like fantasy really allows a lot of mixing of genres. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why you have so many subgenres in fantasy.
Yep.
So many.
All right. Ready to move to the next?
I'm so lucky I get to do biography and memoir, and I've been reading quite a few lately. I read The Green Light by Matthew McConaughey, and I love
that was fun.
Such a great audiobook that if you're just stuck in traffic, it's worth your time. It's amazing.
I agree with that because he reads it and he's hilarious.
And the things he does, you guys, and like that's why this genre is so great, because whether it's The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, which is the one I'm reading right now, which is about the famous, chess turned martial artists, right? And how to learn at a whole new level. He kind of almost does like a blend of self-help through memoir, but it's so cool because you get to see like what it would be like to be an international chess master, and then what it would be like to be an international martial artist. And so I think those of us who love memoir and biography, we really love the idea of what people are capable of, both on the good and the bad, and what real life experiences happen. And I love them because it's such an exploration of character and the unexpected, and how sometimes life is larger than fiction. So That's why I love memoir and biography, but maybe I'm missing something. Am I missing something?
No, I think it's learning. I think that's a part of it too. But I think for me, because I like memoirs as well, I like hearing about real people, what real people have done. Like Matthew McConaughey, he basically, he was in the peak of his movie career of like being like, the romantic side, the romantic love interest. And he goes, screw this, I don't want to do this anymore. And he jumped in on this, whatever it was. It wasn't his truck, it was his Airstream, and took off for a couple of years, which is insanity. But I loved it.
But amazing.
Yeah.
And you think, like, the whole time I was reading that, I thought, and if Elvis would have done that, how different might his story have been instead of getting captured, and like the idea of breaking through free and the bravery. And I just feel like memoirs give us this dialogue of like what happened and how they reacted, and then what if in a totally different way.
Yeah. I loved Michelle Obama's.
I was going to mention her, but then I was like, how cliche will it be?
Okay.
We don't say silence.
I've got one memoir that I liked.
I'm amazed you read one.
I've read a few, but one that I really liked. And it is, I don't know if you guys have read this one, but the title is Never Have Your Dog Stuffed by Alan Alda.
Oh, Alan Alda.
He's the one who does MASH, right?
Yeah.
The doctor from MASH.
He was a scientist too, right?
Oh, I don't remember that part.
Okay. Anyways, we'll end up going off in a weird tangent.
Samantha Bees is really good too.
Samantha Bees is really good. Amy Poehler's is really good. Tina Fey's. Actually, I was really disappointed by Tina Fey's.
I think I read Tina Fey's. We listened to it on audiobook. That is another one that I did.
We don't know what Molly knows, but I bet she knows.
Molly doesn't know what she knows.
It's true. I don't.
I'll bet she knows a lot about. What's the segue here? Oh, it's romance. It's going to Teresa.
Gotcha.
I do know some about romance, but I'm gonna let Teresa talk.
Clever, but no.
Okay, romance. Why? So we all know what romance is. Romance is two people falling in love, and
could be more than two.
It could be. Generally, let's just stick with mainstream. Two people falling in love, and most American and most European follows the Jane Austen model of lovers meet, lovers kind of go, maybe, maybe not. One person's usually more than the other person. They, start dancing around each other. There's, lingering looks. There's maybe spending the night together. It depends on the spice level. And then something happens and they have a misunderstanding, a fight, something. And then there is a grand gesture that somebody does to make up for whatever it was that went wrong. And then they reunite again for a happily ever after. That is 99% of romances. And so people, especially women, they read them for the happy endings. They know what they're going to be getting. There is something that I really enjoy about romances. And I just sat editing notes to a big romance that I just did. And one of the notes I said was that you need to slow down the romantic scenes, because every moment, every linger, every word, every touch matters. And the way I equate that to is like the Pride and Prejudice of Keira Knightley did such an amazing job of that. Yes, ma'am.
So if you're at a slow burn it.
Slow it down.
If that's what you're going for.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
The other reason that women tend to really like it is that it's very empowering for women. It's very much wish fulfillment. Usually, not always, but usually the man will do, or the other person will do anything for her. Sexual scenes, usually she enjoys herself and may enjoy herself first. The focus is on her. And yes, Molly.
It's catered to.
Go ahead. Why don't you keep
No,
keep
it's
going.
catered to this. No, I'm sorry.
Keep going. All good. It's all you. Go for it.
That was I was just like, yeah, there's like a power dynamic that might, regardless of whether someone has that in their own personal life, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Sometimes it's I think people enjoy reading about that and feeling powerful in different ways, right? It's not a powerful of magic and spells, right? But it's a powerful in terms of being catered to, feeling like you are respected and an equal partner and valuable, and your pleasure is important, your needs and wants are important, that kind of thing. We're dancing around some topics here, which I'm pretty proud of us. But there's a reason that smut is making a resurgence. There is a reason.
Wait, did it ever go out of style? I'm confused.
I don't think it ever went out of style. It's just very much more accepted now.
To admit you're reading it.
To admit you're reading it, and to read less mainstream things like reverse harem. And if you don't know what a reverse harem is, that is one woman and many men. That's also a power dynamic too. And for many women, wish fulfillment. It's becoming more mainstream, and it needs to stay mainstream.
My favorite romance thing is okay. So this is
getting sizzly. Sorry.
No. This is like a related trend, which is couples reading romance books together, or reading specifically like smut books together. So usually like the one person in the relationship has read it, and then they like make the other person read it, and then they like react as that person is reading the book. So this is a common thing to do with like Sarah J. Maas books. There's like a really like big population of people, especially, let's generalize, especially women who have read like the Court of whatever. They're all the books are called A Court of Rose and Thorns and Roses, A Court of Frost and Starlight, whatever the names are, have read the books in the series and are making their partners read the books, and then making their partners tell them what they think as they're going through the book and reading it. It's fantastic. There's videos on the internet. There's TikTok reactions. There's reels. There's stuff all over the place. It is hilarious and really, I think, interesting bonding.
Has any of our audience besides me ever done that?
I haven't.
I definitely read parts of Sarah J. Maas to my husband and watched, and it was so funny. He just laughed hysterically. He thought it was the craziest description ever. Like, to him, it was just hilarious. He just laughed in my face.
I'm hoping that was a good bonding moment for you. I'm not sure.
I thought Molly was going to go in a totally different direction on that one.
I didn't know which way to go on that one.
Well, so I'm just telling y'all, it may go different than you planned. It ended up being freaking. I agree with Erin. It is hilarious in real life. It's hilarious.
Hilarious, yeah.
Because when you read it out loud, like I thought I was gonna be like, oh, like whatever, and he started laughing, I started laughing, and then we just spent the time like looking through the book trying to make sure, and then we started doing accents.
That's awesome. That's
oh my god, that's great.
Yeah, hilarious. And
well, so, because
for cheap entertainment, it's a great date night.
So sometimes they describe things and you're like, wait, he put what where? He did.
She called it my what? She called it his what?
Oh my gosh, the word choice.
And then you're like, hey, wait, how do they fit together that way?
Thank you, chat, for having my back on that one.
So
I get a little TMI, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Really. I really recommend, before we move on to the next one, if you really want to get into bad, steamy scenes, and it's an older podcast, but I listened to it during 2020. It saved my life, and it's My Dad Wrote a Porno. And it's intentionally bad. And it's these three English friends reacting to one of their fathers who wrote pornographic material. Badly.
Shout out to Aaron, who says there needs to be more laughter and romance.
I agree.
Yeah. And obviously in porno.
Yeah. And we should be on, like, we should recognize that not all romance has spice, right?
No.
There are closed door romances, there are longbird romances that, like, you don't even get to a kiss until the end of the book. There's all sorts of different ones. We've talked a lot about spicy levels, but there's a lot for a lot of different people to yearn for.
Yeah, there is. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with, I wrote Wrapping Paper Rivals. There's no steam in that. There's one kiss. That's it. There's nothing wrong with a romance that doesn't have any steam in it.
Pro tip from Talia: men writing women on Reddit is so wild. If you want to do a word time.
Yeah, that one's a fun one. I've seen that one too. All right, should we move on to our next?
I'm so excited. Molly.
Oh, it's me again. Okay. So this is my other favorite genre, which also I know Morgan really loves too. I'm sure Teresa likes it. I know Morgan gets likes it. It's fantasy, science, or sorry, it's not fantasy. I said fantasy. It's science fiction. I love science fiction so much. And I think what really draws people to science fiction is the curious mind. Oh, what did you say?
World building.
Well, that also fantasy. Yes, world building. I was going to say, like, this curious mind, this curious, like, what is the future? What's coming? How is the world going to progress? But then also, I think science fiction often has commentary on, and that's a personal point of view here, should have commentary on, how does technology influence our lives? How do we humans perceive ourselves in the world around us? And how is the future going to change that or not change that? How is society going to adapt or regress? How is technology going to force us to change as humans? What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a person? What is life? What is sentience? Like, all of these questions that really make you, like, think about the world and our place in it and ethical dilemmas, I think really attracts people to science fiction. It's what really attracts me. I think sometimes people think science fiction is just like robots and pew, pew, pew. I would argue some of that is more adventure and action, and pure science fiction is much more about technology and the human existence and exploration of the world and our place in it. And that's really interesting and exciting, and sometimes terrifying. Sometimes it's terrifying. Dystopians can be terrifying. What did I miss, Morgan?
I mean, the perfect segue to my genre, which is literary fiction. And the next one I'm going to do is what I think sci-fi and literary fiction share in common.
Yeah.
So these are my two favorite genres, probably because they both deal with the nature of consciousness and sentience. And they also deal with the nature of what it means to be apolitical and political beings. In other words, there's this constant dichotomy about we are alone and individual, and yet we are also communal. And nothing does a better job in bringing about our isolation and our communalism and our connectedness than a good sci-fi novel. Put a person in space on a spaceship and have something happen away from home. And you're getting to deal with the same deep issues that a brilliant literary fic deals with, which why I think a lot of our top literary fiction books are sci-fi. Brave New World, 1984. These are still taught in schools for a reason, right? The Giver is very famous because they all deal with this literary critique of analyzing power structures. Who has the power? Who doesn't have the power? How much power do we have ourselves to make decisions? And I think these are books we read to reflect on what it means, exactly what Molly said, to be human, but also at what level do we want to participate in the society around us? and even participate in our own lives. And I love that about literary fiction, because you will see in literary fic full isolation, Catcher in the Rye, Catch-22, so many of these, famous classics that really kind of evaluate what it means to live inside your own mind. And
I love it. I love the way the chat's going too. There are a lot of sci-fi fans in the chats.
I think Aaron has a great comment on sci-fi, which I think Mark then reflects, which is you can talk about these things, talking about these types of things in sci-fi, because it's removed from our world, so you can confront those themes without worrying about real life, which is often true, right?
Yeah.
Fantasy can do it as well, but it's more known to be done in sci-fi, I would say.
And I think it's and literary sci-fi too. Yes,
literary does it a ton.
Yeah.
I think when you put it in sci-fi, sometimes you take down people's barriers. For like the big not allegory, but the big example here might be slavery. And robots are often stand-in for slavery in science fiction. But sometimes people don't know that if they're not paying attention, they don't know that they're talking about discrimination and slavery. And so you get those themes and those ideas into people in discussing the theme without having people's guards up, because maybe if you just went into it being like, let's talk about slavery, they might be like, ooh, I don't want to read a book about that. John, let's watch iRobot. We're like, yeah, let's watch iRobot. Will Smith's in it.
Right. And Asimov does such a good job of what Mark is talking about in the chat, which is it reflects the ways, he says, our current society in ways a direct comic cannot.
Yes.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, Teresa John, sorry.
No, don't apologize. I'm the one who interrupted you. I was going to say, Star Trek really did such an amazing job of holding up a mirror to society. Maybe not quite so much the original one, but Next Gen definitely did. DS9 did. DS9 did a fantastic job of doing that. And I think it allowed my family to have these conversations without in a more safer backdrop, I think, because we're talking about fiction, but we're not.
That's a great way to put it, right? I love Star Trek, right? Because you have, it is set up to bring about interesting ethical dilemmas and interesting conflicts, right? You have, whether it's the famous episode of Measure of a Man, less famous episodes that are about communication, but you constantly have this idea of, I shouldn't get too far into this, but like this prime directive. And then so often, right, don't interfere. But then, well, what if by not interfering, people die? Well, now I have a moral conflict. Now I could use my superior technology, but I can't because that might influence this culture. Or I could do this, but then, and it's just set up to have these really interesting, Teresa, like you said, these really interesting dialogues about like, what is acceptable behavior? What is not? How do you influence other people? Should you not? Should you use your technology? Should you use your power? Should you not? Like all of these things are so interesting and relate to our world.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting too far into the
No, we've got so much great chat here. Star Trek First Interracial Kiss. We got Rod Sterling with the Twilight Zone. I would also say Black Mirror, if you ever watched that. I was going to say
Black Mirror too. Black Mirror is so great. And how true is this idea that it's about a contemplative life? That it's philosophical at its roots, right? Almost feel like the Socratic dialogue happening among the authors, especially in lit fic, as they throw out these ideas and then create this like dialogue back and forth with each other between episodes or even between, authors. And I just think for me, that is such a fulfilling, like when you recognize, you start to pull at the string, or find the Easter egg, right? And like see the historical connection or whatever. Like I love lit fic so much because then I'm like, oh my gosh, they're talking about this historic event that happened, which is like what you're saying, what Mark was saying about reflecting on this society. or just when they just see you and your like naked truth, the part that you thought no one else could understand. And you're like, oh my God, my friend, my favorite professor used to say, my best friends died years ago, but they left me books to talk to.
Aww.
And I just think that's literary fiction.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. All right. Do we have one more?
We do.
I forgot. I've got lost. Okay.
The category known as nonfiction, which really is similar in some ways to what we talked about with memoir. And
yeah, but nonfiction is going to cover, it's going to cover self-help books. It's going to cover historical analysis. There can be some biography in there. It can study religious themes. I don't read a lot of nonfiction other than memoirs. Poli-sci,
poli-sci is really popular.
I read a lot of.
I was going to say a lot of like history, like in terms of military history or like event history, like Hidden Figures started as a book.
That's
AstroTurf is an interesting one, like the history of the moon landing, the history of blah, 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 nuclear science, this and that. So like, it's not all science, but you get like that personal
journalism. Yeah.
Yes.
Journalism.
So I guess we read nonfiction all the time. Because we're all like, I'm like, oh God, I read that every day.
As a teacher, I bet you do.
Well, I wake up in the morning and read the New York Times every day. So like, or the Washington Post, right? And I'll read anything Al Jazeera will print. So I think it's interesting how we're probably inundated with way more nonfiction than we think, but it becomes so normalized we forget it's reading sometimes.
That's a really good point too. Yeah.
That reminds me of like what is it? Thank you, teacher, if you can read this.
Yeah.
Because it becomes so part of our way of getting information, we forget we're getting information.
So Morgan, what do you think draws people to nonfiction other than like this idea of like, well, I need to be right. I wake up every day and I need to have this critical information. Like, why are people drawn to nonfiction books?
I just love to learn things.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I'm constantly like, now that I think about it like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm reading like 3 nonfiction. I'm reading one right now on student trauma. I'm reading another one on neuroscience by Sapolsky, like the one he just came out on neuroscience. It's a thick old book. It's taken me forever. And then I'm reading another one, The Art of Learning, which is kind of like a memoir, but it's really also like neuroscience. And I think it's just that like I have to know things because I think you don't want to go through the world being like a dit or being like getting your information from unreliable sources or not understanding how the world works. Like I like to know like how my body works. So I'll find myself like reading anatomy books. Like, or when you stumble across like my horse got sick. So what do? You open up a medicine journal and start reading everything you can about laminitis or whatever it is. Like, I feel like just as educated citizenry, don't we just like, aren't we, our innate curiosity just like drives us to understand our world, right?
I think so. That's a really good way to put it. I like that. I think I'll end up reading nonfiction to a lot of times for my fiction. Yeah, I'm like, you fall down the rabbit hole and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what trees are in Sacramento?
Right.
And then you end up like on like some sort of crazy, like learning all about trees.
I think I get mine in a slightly different way because this, I think, is where like true crime podcasts come in.
Oh,
I don't particularly listen to like true crime podcasts, but I do find interesting like some podcasts that like explore history or a historical event or historical figures, not like in a biographical way, kind of, well, sometimes, but in like a history of like, okay, here's this person and here's, the things they did and here's the context of what they did and we have commentary to talk about it. And so like one of my favorite right now is like there's like American Scandal is one that I've listened to a little bit, or like Behind the Bastard is a very interesting one that takes these figures in history that maybe we have a surface level knowledge of, and then goes deeper, not only just like who they were and the things they did, but what was the context of the world around them. It's those kind of things to me are very interesting. And I think it's easier for me in that format for me to digest versus like a book I'm like, where's the plot? How are my characters developing?
Yeah.
So if I listen to it in a podcast and the characters are like the narrator, right? The narrator is the character telling me about the person. I'm somehow much more invested. I'm like there. I want to learn about this historical event. Yes, tell me about the history of salt or whatever it is. Aaron's mentioning that one.
I asked that because I really wanted to end on that note.
Yeah, I like that.
I just feel like all the genres are so amazing, and I truly love all of them. Yeah, you were right. I looked it up, Aaron, as soon as I saw that, and it looks exactly like something I am going to completely love. So it's called Salt: A World History, and it's written by Kurlansky, I think is how you say it. And just listen to the byline of this. Best-selling author Mark Kurlansky turns his attention to a common household item with a long and intriguing history, salt. And he says, an unlikely world history, Kurlansky finds the world in a grain of salt. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
That sounds right up your alley.
I know. I was like, it's world history and it's metaphor, and you can feel the philosophy, and I'm so excited.
And then Mark added the Songs of Distant Earth, which I've never heard of, but I just added that to my list. Okay. Molly, real quick before we head out, are you typing it in?
Yeah, I'm typing it in because I'm looking up the author.
Oh, there you go. Morgan, any recommendations of a book that people haven't read?
I think if you haven't read McConaughey's Green Lights, I just loved it.
I loved it.
It was just such a my husband and I listened to it together. It was actually a really good date night. It was so fun. It was such a fun thing to listen and we audiobooked it. I had the book, but we ended up audiobooking it. And that was just such a little fun popcorn read. That's one I've read this week that I've just really, really enjoyed.
I liked that one too.
All right. I almost sent you guys to a religious novel.
Oh,
here it is. So the book is, and this is for those of you who are fans of science fiction. This is a science fiction one for you. And the book is called it's difficult to find. You Will Never Be the Same by Coriander Smith. I'll put it in I'll type it in the chat. It's small. It's small. I could pull it off my shelf if I wanted to run away. And it is a series of short stories that have an overarching theme. I'm not going to ruin it anymore for you. It's absolutely wonderful. It will blow your mind. You will never be the same.
Look,
all right.
We have salt, and then we have spice in the chat too. Spice.
I saw that. I think that's fun. We've also got the Forgotten Seamstress. Ooh, that one's been on my list, the Forgotten Seamstress. All right, you guys, I'm going to go lowbrow. I'm going to say a book or a series that I deeply enjoy. Don't look for plot holes because there's a ton of them in there. And that's going to be Jodi Taylor's The Chronicles of St. Mary series. They're freaking hilarious. She is a fantastic dialogue writer. She's a fantastic character writer, but it is about time travel, hence all the plot holes. And it's just fun. It's just fun, ridiculous. Oh, and you get to learn about history because there's a lot of history in it that they ruin, but that's okay. That's another story.
Thank you for doing this fun genre exploration with me. I know more about why I read the genres I like, and maybe even more realizing that the genre I read the most is definitely nonfiction.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin, for that.
Right. Before we head out, a few housekeeping notes. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget, if you like this video, like it. If you've not subscribed to us, subscribe to us. We're a really small channel. That helps. We love that you're here. That definitely helps us. And if you want to support us a little bit more, we do have a Patreon starting at $1 a month. It helps us cover website fees. It helps us cover the cost of, our streaming services, our contests that we do, things like that. So we really appreciate it. This is, not our day jobs, And one more thing after that, we're going to do more live shows in the future. We do a lot of these, and we're going to do some book tastings. So by that we mean we'll have different genres where we'll read the first pages. Morgan led us on a wonderful journey last month. Go look for that video, and we have more coming up. So if there's a genre you want us to read in the future and have more read and drink a little bit, let us know. We love you all. Those were my housekeeping notes that I had. Any final thoughts from either of you?
Yes, I'm gonna try to read all these books in the chat. So thank you so much.
And a big thank you to Molly's mom for saying that she really loves the live shows. And we really appreciate you showing up all the time.
Thank you to both my parents who maybe are here in the chat and my sister-in-law. And,
but we love all of you guys. We got to meet Talia. It was awesome. All right. I think that's it. Peace out.
Bye all.
Bye.